Bienvenidos.
Welcome.
This is Learning with Lobos. I'm Paloma.
I'm Loni, and we are education consultants with Early Childhood Services Center.
And this is a UNM podcast for early childhood.
This is Season 1, Episode 3, and we're going to be talking about fatherhood.
We have a special guest with us today, Joel Casas, Senior Training and Development Consultant for ECSC. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Joel, and about the book that you brought today.
Well, first and foremost, thank you guys for inviting me onto the podcast. I'm really excited to be part of Episode 3, Season 1. I feel like it's going to reach a lot of people, and I feel like the topics that you guys are going to cover are really going to help, shed a lot of light to early childhood in general and education. So the book I brought, it's called Dad School. I have seen this book before, and one of the reasons that I want to highlight it is because it focuses on children's perspective on how they see dads and or even families as they're, when dads usually say, I went to school, kids are always like, what, school? Like, now you're a grown-up. How can you go to school? It's only for kids. Because kids don't really see their either parents or adults as students or as young people. And I think here in this book, it really highlights the children's imagination into what dad school is. So as he's picturing what dad school is, he's imagining his father going to classes on cooking him breakfast and reading him bedtime stories. And the pictures and the illustrations in the book really highlight those things of like, the kid imagining like, oh, my dad at dad school totally learned how to read me a story. That's why he's such a great dad.
That's so cute. I love it.
I know. And I think that's one of those things that these books really, emphasize children's creative imagination when it comes to how they see their parents and the impact that it has. I mean, to really think about this child as he's reading this book or as you're reading this book, I mean, I could see them really thinking about it. Like, oh, maybe my dad or my parent also went to dad school, and that's why they learned how to fix a car or do chores around the house or how to drive. So I think it just lends a really good perspective in terms of how the children see their folks, especially since sometimes I don't feel like they can imagine what they were as young kids.
And that's, I was thinking that when you said that, when you tell a kid, when I was a kid, what? I remember myself when my grandma said when I was a kid, and I said, no, you've always been grandma. You've always been Pali. And she's like, she started laughing. She's like, I was a kid too one time. And then, what?
Yeah, and my niece always, there was this thing because, I called my mom, and she calls her, my mom, grandma. And, when she was young, I think she was maybe 3, and I was just like, that's my mom. She's like, no, you're wrong.
That's grandma.
That's grandma. That's your grandma. And I was just like, no, your grandma is my mom. So, I mean, just to see how these kids like have all these revelations, right, as they're growing up and developing and they're trying to interpret their world. I mean, it's books like these that really highlight some of those particular things. So
this reminds me of literally when like kids, when I was in the classroom, would be like, don't you sleep here? Like, you don't live in the classroom? And I'd be like, no, I have a home after school. When you go home, I go home shortly after. And they were like, it was like, how is this possible that my teacher doesn't live here?
Right.
And I always thought that was so funny. That's what that reminded me of.
Yeah. And, it's like when they run into you, as an educator, I've been teaching now for many years, now mainly adults, but when I was a teacher in early childhood, especially with the infants and toddlers, preschoolers, or when I taught in elementary ed, I would run into my kids out in the real world, and the first thing is like shock. And then it's, the big hello, like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, how are you doing? Like, they just don't imagine they only imagine running into you at school, right? Because that's how they associate with you,
the outside world. All of a sudden you're in their world in a different place where they didn't know that you were going to be there. But that's pretty cool. I really like that, the story and talking about, well, my dad had to learn how to be a dad somewhere, right?
Yeah. And it's so great because he's saying it from the experiences he's had with his father. And,
right.
I think when in the book, when he's highlighting at dad school, he learned how to read me a bedtime story, how to cook me breakfast, how to, take me, how to take me on a bike ride or go to the park. Like, all those are the experiences that help shape who he is as an individual, as a growing individual. And I think it's important as we, read these books to our kids or the experiences that we have with our children that we know that we're going to have a long-term impact with them. So we want to make sure that we can have all these positive experiences that they can reference, because they do. They reference all these things all the time, whether it's good or bad. So we want to make sure that we have as much positive interactions with the kids on a day-to-day basis. And when it comes to fatherhood and fatherhood engagement, I'm probably jumping the topic.
No,
No,
jump
when
in,
it comes-
right in.
So fatherhood engagement, I think it's important that we try to fill their daily lives with as much positive male role models so
yeah.
they can see it consistently, and now that's their interpretation of the world, right? If someone tells them like, oh, how did you become a great uncle or a great grandfather or a great, stepdad or cousin or male educator, they have all these associations that they could tap into to say, you know what, that is good positive behavior. I know exactly what a good teacher, male teacher, looks like. I know what a good father is. I know what a good grandfather is, or a good stepfather is, because of all these experiences that have shaped them. You know, and that doesn't just go through like stuff at home, but school and in the community. And I think one of the things as we start working and thinking about fatherhood engagement, it's a community thing, right? I mean, we have
What do you
to
mean by
see it.
that?
Well, we have to see the community as being part of the education, right?
Of
When
course.
I'm out in the field and I was in the movie theater last night with my family, and we were watching a new movie, and I was holding the door for other families. As kids walk in and they see me do that, that's part of that learning process. Like, oh, that's I'm a guy, he's a guy. That's what we should be doing, right? And they start associating all these behaviors, whether, you're saying things like, excuse me, or pardon me, or let me help you with that. All those things they're seeing like, oh, okay, that's what I need to, be more a part of. That's how I need to be involved. And, as you're doing things in the community, if a kid saw me litter, and
that
I'm
guy
just
did
like,
it.
oh, that guy did it, like he threw that water bottle on the grass, so I'm just going to toss it too. So that's what I mean by the community, right? It's our actions start shaping the kids, and it's not just like there's so much that we can control at home, right? There's so much that I could control in the classroom, but when the child's not in my house, when they're not in my classroom, then the rest of the community are help shaping who they are and what they're trying to do. And I think that's where we really need to bring that awareness into the community, and how all these behaviors that we have, as males, is going to help shape children's behavior, positive pro-social behavior, right? That we want them to have, so that they can, develop into positive contributing members of the society, saying like, you know what, we shouldn't do that because that's not right. Because I've seen it. My father does it. My grandfather does it. My neighbor does it. That one guy I saw that one time at the theater does it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's
And
all
then-
those different things.
And when you're talking about within the community, and if we bring it back to school and in the classroom, especially with early childhood classrooms, representation isn't there as much, right? We know there's a stigma about the involvement of fathers in the classroom at a younger age, of having teachers who are male in the classroom at a younger age. So, what are we doing right now to have that representation? Even, let's say my husband, you guys know I had a baby, when he goes by himself or it's his turn to change the baby's diaper and we're out in public, the men's room doesn't always have a diaper changing table.
Oh, right.
So that's
a good-
already a stigma that it's always going to be the mom changing the baby's diaper. It's going to be the mom volunteering at school. It's going to be the mom that's doing those things. And that's definitely a problem, right?
Yeah, and as we're looking at how all these stereotypes and stigmas and all these, we're looking at a lot of different things that are having this impact, and not a good one. And I'm talking about like, some of it might be cultural, some of it might be just, if you weren't there to learn from somebody on how best to do something, then you're not going to know how to do it. So the more we can involve families and fathers and males into the classroom, so they could start seeing them as, I always think about, in the classroom, fathers have all these positive child rearing practices. They can change a diaper, right?
Yeah.
They can do a lot of things. And I think sometimes we don't see that because we assume that they don't do that, right?
That they can't,
or
won't.
they can't or won't. So there's all these assumptions. And I think as educators, as we start working on different things in the classroom to help support this fatherhood engagement, I think it starts with us, you know, to really not only check our assumptions and our own biases around fathers in the classroom or males in the classroom, whether it's uncles, stepfathers, grandparents, and their capacity for child rearing, their capacity for involvement, their capacity to play a big part in their children's lives. You know, whether even if it's a small role to play, it's still a role to play. Yeah. And I think all those different things are cumulative, right? If a dad appears, you know, in the classroom once a week because he has to work or, you know, he just can't have it, eventually those once a weeks add up to days. Yeah. And those days become impactful, right? It's that cumulative effect. Right. The more we see it happen, the more it builds and the greater it grows. It snowballs. So the more we can fill that child's lives in the classroom with those positive male role models, the more it's going to snowball and turn and have a larger effect on the kids. And, you know, I always think about the classroom and one of those things, you know, and we'll talk about some of those stereotypes, biases, and assumptions, because don't get me wrong, as an educator, I've made a lot of mistakes and I had a lot of those assumptions. And I think, you know, now that I'm seeing it from the other side, that I work with educators to support best practices in the classroom, I feel like I do see myself in those educators, especially as they're new, because sometimes I go in and I see a mom and dad picking up a child while I'm there, and you see, you know, the teacher just addressing the mom.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
And I was going to say, it's kind of like maybe an old school mentality, no? That that's mom's job. That's what mom does. And it's, no, I mean, dads can go in and pick him up or be part of the routine as well. And yeah, have that. You can see that representation. Because some kids, a male role model, I mean, it could be anywhere that you see, like you said, those behaviors that you can get, but it is kind of a, well, that's the mom that's supposed to do that or that. And I know you with your daughter are super involved in her school, and that's always cool because it's different, you know.
And it is
different dynamic.
I've had to work really hard to get there. You know, it's like it was an uphill battle, and you know, there's all these comments that still to this day are there, like, you know, mother knows best, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, true, my mom knows a lot, you know, but my dad taught me a ton. You know?
Somebody wins. I love you, mom.
Yeah. And then we're going to Disney. You know, so it's those things that it's not. You know, increasing fatherhood engagement does not diminish the mom's role. And I think that's another thing that people think like, well, you know, the mom, you know, it's like the mom is here more often. So she knows. I'm like, well,
it's
true.
In addition to, not in replace of.
There you go. And it's not like the dad doesn't want to be there, but there might be other barriers, right? There might be work or different, you know, things, custody issues that might limit their ability to try to be there more often. So when they are there, we have to try to do our best to make sure that they stay engaged, that they are involved. And, you know, I think it was the first teacher I ever addressed with my kiddo, I think was in first grade during the parent-teacher conference, because she was just talking to Tanya, and I'm like, hey, like a little nod this way, you know, like, hey, like I have some questions too, you know, but it's all those things we have to start doing that intentionally, right? Without feeling like, well, you know,
they don't care or they don't understand, or
like, you're just the dad, you know, or, you know, you're not here as often. You know, I see mom all the time since I don't see you. That's why I addressed her first.
Right. I have a relationship with her. And that's what I was thinking too, Paloma. You said generational. I just recently saw this video about, it was saying that the millennial generation of fathers are the most involved in history.
Wow.
That they're the ones that know, you know, they read their child a book to bed, they're involved in school, they know what's going on, they pack lunches, and that's not something that was happening in previous generations. And that stigma is possibly shifting towards what we're talking about. And I wonder did we make that shift ourselves? Like, was it that, you know, our generation as kids wanted to see dads more, so we started being different? Like, as a mom, I want my husband to be more involved. he wants to be more involved as a dad now. So it's an interesting shift.
Well, experiences teach us a lot, and I'll be honest with you, I was very resentful towards my father during my school days. And a lot of it had to do with him not, being at my games or participating in school activities. And it wasn't until I had a real talk with my dad when we were, when I was a young adult, and he was just like, all those Nikes that you needed, for the games and the jerseys and all the stuff.
I provided those.
There's a reason you had all those things. And it's because I was working, the 12-hour shifts or, to support you so you can participate and do that and get a good education and do this. And then boom, an aha moment came for me, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, like I can't believe like I had all this resentment towards my dad and with that particular thing, because I love my pops, he's a great dad. But I feel like those things are like highlighted. So now I make a concerted effort, to do things for my kiddo that she'll always remember that I'm a part of, So like I have a picture with Bree since kindergarten from her first day of school, and then another one on her last day that we have every year since she's in middle school. And she thinks it's embarrassing, but it's still something that
one
we
day
do.
she'll appreciate it.
Wait until she's older.
And she does. And, I've never missed one of her first day of schools. I've always been at every parent-teacher conference.
Wow.
I've always been a part of the PTA. But, again, all that stuff has to be prioritized, has to be intentional. And you have to feel wanted, right? Like, if a school didn't create an environment where I wanted to be there, then I'm not going to be there. Like I already have enough issues everywhere else, to go to a school where they're like, what are you doing here? Like, nah, welcome is what I want to see, or like, hey, I'm glad you made it,
And I was thinking also it could be a multiple of reasons of why the change, but also back in the day, I feel, women are at home in the kitchen, and maybe even it was even hard for men sometimes to say, I'll be the stay-at-home dad and you go working, because it's such a stigma. And also, not to be grim or anything, but I think divorce is, at a very high rate. So dads are forced to do things on their own too, because when they have custody or they have, I know my brother, when he was a single dad for a few years, so he had to do everything. He had to take my nephew to the bathroom or do, the lunches or all that stuff. So I think it's a combination of things why maybe things are changing now, and maybe fathers, so they're maybe feeling more welcome. Maybe the circumstances now that just forces you that you have to be the one that does everything, So that's, but the stigma.
I'm
is
not
one
saying
of the
we're not
biggest.
making step forwards for sure. I think just like Lonnie mentioned, we've made great strides and we're seeing it more often. And I'm glad we're highlighting it right now in this pod, for a reason. Right. We're trying to get more exposure on the topic of fatherhood engagement, but I still don't think it's enough.
Right.
And we still don't see it happening as often as we want it to have that deep, meaningful impact for the kids, right? Because it's not just one thing. It's not just the fathers and it's not just the grandparents, but it's also bringing in the community and the positive male role models in that community to highlight some of those things, right? Especially when we see, male nurses and firefighters and male educators, like all these people to come in and show the kids that, hey, like these are professions that we can all do and have a positive impact on our lives. And I'm always around. We're in the community. This is what we're doing. I always see all these, warm, fuzzy videos of people thanking the garbage man and doing, the delivery driver and all these really good things. But, in reality, that takes a lot of work. And is it happening all the time? Are they doing it out once a week, thanking their garbage man, or just that one time on social media just to get a few likes? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it shouldn't happen more often. It should,
and Father's Day, which just happened, right? Are we celebrating fathers and male figures in the classroom just in the month of June or throughout the year?
And Father's Day, here's the thing. I had an issue with Father's Day as being it falls in the summer. You know what I'm saying?
Oh.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Well,
and
my husband got his gift, no offense, it's okay, but he got his Father's Day gift from the baby from the classroom late. But mine was like right on time when Mother's Day was happening. It was like in there on the day. And it's just one of those things. It's like summertime, things are going on. We're busy. Oops, yes, it's Father's Day. Here's a craft. And he's like, oh, I got it a week late, but it's okay. And I'm like, oh, my heart broke for him a little.
Look at the grocery stores. I mean, Father's Day, there may be like a grill set up with a few Father's Day knickknacks. And then Mother's Day has a big old wing. You know,
and
Yeah.
Father's
all
Day,
kinds
I
of
feel
gifts.
like the things that they're at the store, they could just be like manly things in
Oh, they're
general.
so
It doesn't
manly thing,
have
yeah.
to be like, oh, this is for Father's Day. It's like tools and like you said, stuff for the grill. But there isn't like it doesn't seem like an event. It's more just, hey, here's some man stuff.
Yeah. It's like moms, they need to be relaxing. They need to be pampered and treated. And dads, go grill and golf.
It's
Don't you
like,
feel there's like still like a little bit of, you're supposed to be strong, so you don't really need mental health or things that now we're highlighting. It's harder, I guess, as a man to say, hey, I need help too, you know?
Yeah, and you know, that is definitely another topic for another day, but I think it is important. It highlights all those stigmas associated with fatherhood, you know, and I was just going to say, you know, I always equate, you know, Mother's Day to being like the Christmas for Mother's Day, you know, it's just everywhere. It's celebrated for like a month, you know, it starts way ahead of time. You have to plan ahead. Because I have to grab Tanya's gift. Like, I have to order it weeks before, you know? So it gets here on time and leading up to it, she's like, it's almost Mother's Day. I'm like, I know. You know?
And it's a gift, and then what are you going to do that day?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And then some follow-up, too.
And for Father's Day, it's like, it's like Thanksgiving. It's more like an obligation. Oh, yeah, it's here.
It's more like President's Day.
Oh, my gosh.
You're lucky if you get a day off, you know?
Oh, yes. This is a good time to maybe do our questions from the field. What do you think?
Yeah,
Let's do
sounds
it.
good.
I need more.
All right. So Antonio is asking the question, what strategies can I try in the classroom to get fathers more involved?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Strategies is
Love
always,
it.
that's
You know, first, I'm going to say first, it's really having some reflection to really think about our own perspective and our own practices in the classroom, right? Do we have enough books that highlight fathers in the classroom? Do we have visuals that highlight fathers in the classroom? What are some of those things that we're doing that make the classroom inviting, you know, for fathers? And I think having those reflections first is your first big strategy, right? Really thinking about it intentionally, like, am I doing anything to maybe alienate some of the fathers or some of the males in the, you know, some of the male figures in the children's lives? Like, what am I doing? How's my classroom doing? What are some of my own actions that might say, like we were talking earlier, right? Do I, you know, look at the fathers when they come in? Do I just send a text to mom, but not to dad? You know, when I shoot the email to the family, is it just the mother's email or is it both parents? Or, hey, you know, I know grandpa drops off every day. Like, maybe he should be included in this email chain. Is it cool? You know, who do I need to talk to make sure those things are happening? So first of all, it's the communication piece is big and really reflecting on how we're going to be looking at that intentionally. After that, it's looking at those intentional strategies to bring them in, right? You're trying to sell the impact that this has for the children's lives, and it's huge. We know it's a huge impact. Right. So what are we going to do to try to change that? You know, and one of the things I did, you know, I definitely always had, you know, I'm a big sports fan. So of course I had my big old Raiders sign, my giant Celtic sign, you know, 2024 champs now. Yeah, more
You're
than
not
the
gonna
Lakers.
let go of that.
I have to highlight that. My Yankees things, you know, things that might bring a topic. And I think it was my intentionality with the fathers in the classroom. And again, at the beginning, it wasn't like that. You know, I was conformed to the same step where it was all about mom, right? But as I grew as a professional and started understanding the impact and how easier it was for me to support the children with behavior and social stuff, especially when I got the whole family involved. And it's just not like, hey, mom, like we need to address this behavior issue. It's like, hey, I need to speak to the whole family about what's going on in the kids' lives because it's having an impact on the learning. And it was a team thing, you know, and sometimes I did get the excuses like, well, dad's busy or he's at work. I'm like, well, you know, my schedule's flexible, so let's look at a date that works for all of us, you know, because it is a team thing. it's us working together to support the children's learning, and it takes all of us to do it. You know, it's not just my job as a teacher, not just you as a parent, but all of us as a community. And, you know, as we start team building some of those things, doing it intentionally, it really helps supported that piece, you know, and the kids saw it differently. You know, fathers and male figures, positive male figures in the classroom, you know, because I did have some fathers that were great. They would volunteer and they would be,
They want to be involved.
yeah, they want to be involved, and they changed the dynamic of my classroom in a very positive way, right? Kids started looking up to them differently. You know, when I had moms come in and volunteer, they would look at them in a very nurturing way, right? But
They
when
bring something different to the table.
they bring a different energy that they also need.
You see that with male teachers too.
Yeah,
That's
you
another
see
topic,
that.
but-
You know, this is another topic because I was really, you know, being a male educator, I had a lot of energy. But, you know, the fathers bring a very protective nature to the classroom, right? Then the kids felt safer there, not just expressing themselves, but also they felt more comfortable because it's just the feedback that they provided was more, it's fine, you know, instead of like, oh my gosh, you dropped the milk, we got to clean it. The dad was like, yeah, we'll figure it out later, you know? So they've just felt a little more secure to be able to express themselves more in a different way, whether it was with art or trying, you know, math. It's just the dynamic. And I think they need that. You know, it's a different perspective. You know, when I had my moms come in there and we used to do all these little races with doing math problems and all this really cool stuff in the classroom, and the moms would get really intense. You know, they're like, oh, come on, you got to try harder. And I always assumed that the dads were more competitive. And
that's
they
why there's the
are.
term soccer mom.
Oh yeah.
That's true. And
It's not just that she does all the lunches and things, is that, you know.
Competitive.
Uh-huh.
yeah, and then when my dads came in and I did the same thing, their support was holistic.
Huh.
Like,
Interesting.
come on, guys, we can all do this. Now moms were just about their children and, you know, trying to, you know, but
Wow.
no, the dads were holistic, right? And I think it's that protective nature that fathers bring to the tables, and grandparents have it too, right? Where they, you know, grandfathers always feel like they have to corral their family, you know? And I think that is a cultural thing and a cultural aspect as well. And I think all those things really provide that different, just a different approach that the kids need to see, you know, that it's out there, you know, that it's not just this way. There's multitude of ways because grandfathers behave differently. Uncles
Oh,
behave
definitely.
differently. You know, the way I participated in my kiddo's school is different than when I participated with my nieces. You know, I mean, I did uncle things.
Right.
And to me, uncle things is not to overshadow my brother-in-law as he's, you know, doing his, but, you know, to be, you know, the cool uncle, not, you know, in, you know, providing illicit stuff, but more or less being a cool uncle and like, hey, you know, like if dad gets too intense for some reason or another, I got your back. You know?
Yes.
And I was gonna
I'm gonna
say,
buy you the, you know, the ice cream cone that your dad didn't want to. You know?
I was gonna say because I didn't grow up with my father, but my uncle, all my uncles. But you know, there's the fun uncle, of course. I remember, and just how he was. You know, like maybe he knew he wasn't stepping over anybody's toes, so he was a little bit more, you know, aggressive with his presence in my life, which was totally cool because those were my male role models, my uncles and my brother. But again, it's not like I don't know how a man should behave. I saw it. I saw, like you said, in my community and my family. So that's pretty cool. And those are good strategies. And I just wanted to say, when you said about the having your sports stuff, because I've seen it all the time, especially with your in your vehicle or whatever, if you're wearing it, it does start the conversation, because even if it's not your team, you know, men
Oh, yeah.
and especially men, but everybody, but especially men, will start talking to you about, oh, you're Celtics?
Yeah, and it creates that bridge, right? And we're trying to create bridges to foster that relationship, right? Because we do see one parent typically more often than other because they're dropping off, you know,
Right.
or they have a certain routine that they have to maintain for their work or because they're going to school or whatever the case is. And I think both those things are super important as you're trying to bridge build, you know, and you are trying to build this bridge. And sometimes you just need a plank, and other times you need the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, you need a lot of work to really get to the other side. And others are just easy. It's just a hop and a skip. So it's really looking at it from that perspective, right? Like, how much work do I have to put in to make sure that I'm able to get to that other side, right? And that other side is that relationship with that father, to be able to do more in the classroom.
And speaking of perspectives too, you know, you said stepping on toes. It'd be interesting too to think maybe some fathers feel like it's stepping on the mom's toes to be involved
That's
in
a good
classrooms.
point. Interesting.
Right? Oh no, my wife usually signs up for snack or is the one that, you know, goes in the classroom and reads at circle time and does the, you know, the art activity. I don't want to step on her toes. And it may not even be, you know, something that they're aware that they're thinking of, but because we have the stigma, because we've had it like this for so long, and because teachers, maybe they have this like, oh, I don't want to, you know, force the father to be involved. So it's like all of these different perspectives. If we just kind of open up, communicate, talk about things like this more, then we're going to see a change.
Yeah, and, you know, I talk to Tanya all the time because, you know, Tanya, she's a phenomenal mother, you know, very involved. She's just the everything to our kiddo, and she gets very mama bear all the time, you know, and sometimes I have to tell her, like, to take a step back because she's, you know, like, father bear exists too. You know, it's not a term that's used, but, like, you don't have to go all that all the time. And, you know, because of my experience and everything that I've been through, you know, all the research that I read, the schooling, I mean, even in graduate school, there was just a class that I took just called Fatherhood, you know?
Oh, I love
And
that.
it was really cool.
I
And
love
I
that.
presented on being a step parent. And, you know, being
wow.
a step parent has its own challenges and its own,
Yes, it
you know,
does.
things that comes up. But it's also just as impactful, you know? It's deeply ingrained into all these kids that, you know, like maybe a step parent is not your real parent, but the impact that we have
You're a
is,
bonus dad, and I'm a bonus mom. That's what we say.
yeah, and that's a great thing. But it comes with its own challenges. And I think as we were talking about the whole mama bear situation, you know, I feel like sometimes mama bears become too mama bear that it undermines father bear to a certain degree. And I don't think it happens intentionally. You know, it's just, to me, it was Tanya being Tanya, right? And to me, that's a good thing, right? She, you know, Bree needed a mom to always be there and to know that she has a mom that will support her, protect her all the time. But, you know, when Father Bear comes along, you know, you have to let him Father Bear it too. You know what I'm saying? Because it's true. Like, yeah, mom can take the role of always changing the diaper, always feeding, always doing this, always doing that, because they can. And they're very capable.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel like sometimes it does alienate the father a little bit, you know, and we need that time to be able to have that father-daughter day or, you know, father-son day to be able to show, you know, and there's all those things, right? Like, you know, I taught Bree how to shoot. I taught Bree how to fish. I taught Bree how to ride a bike. Like, I let her drive the golf cart the other day, you know, not legally, you know, but she had a great time. But it's all those things, right? But to me, those are some of those things that are that stigma piece, right? That you're supposed to do that because you're the dad. You know?
All the rough
stuff. But, you know, I also am teaching her to crochet, you know, because that's one of my favorite things that she wanted to learn. So I was just like, you know what? Why not? I shared with her my obsession with Taylor Swift. You know? She warms
you're
my
a
soul.
Swiftie, okay.
Yeah, I'm a huge Swiftie, you know? And at the same time, you know, when I took her to the Raider game and she got to tailgate for the first time in all her Raider gear, you know, being from New Mexico and being in Vegas and being surrounded by fans, I mean, everybody was just like, go Raiders. And I mean, they saw her as part of the community and she just embraced it. And now it's all about Raider Nation, you know?
It's like we were saying with with the kids that they have their own, they're in their own little world, right? But at that moment, as she realized, oh, this is a big community that we're part of, and all of a sudden the jersey meant probably a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
I get it.
I feel like it's those things, those type of impacts. I mean, maybe, you know, not a game like that, but it's all those things,
Because
right?
you lost.
No, we're winners. But, like, you know, I'm the one that cooks in our family, you know, and I the one that cooks for, you know, my wife's a vegetarian. So since Tanya's a vegetarian, she likes to prepare her own stuff. And, you know, me and Bree are carnivores, man. You know, we like the meat. So she always sees me cooking, right? So I'm always in the kitchen. We're always preparing our stuff. And we have all these close ties. And the other day, she was like, you know, when you were gone, because I went, you know, I was in Lovington for a few days doing the play corners, which hopefully you guys highlight later. She was just like, I missed your cooking. Mom was cooking some stuff and there's no meat. I was like, but you know, like,
come back please.
I need a steak, some tacos, some carne asada, I need something different.
Yeah.
And, those are things, right, that make an impact,
Dads are learning how to do little girls' hair.
Oh,
They're letting them
my
practice painting their nails, all of the things. I mean, my dad didn't know how to do my hair when I was little.
Tanya taught me because Tanya got a job where she had to go in at 6. So I had to take Bree to school every morning, and she was like, you have to learn how to comb her hair. And I was like, all right.
And she has a lot of
And
hair.
she has a lot of hair, that kiddo, man. And it is curly. And I was there decurling everything, going through it. And I did this thing called the jasmine braid because I got really lazy. So I just put all kinds of rubber bands in there. But she loved
Today
it.
you look like a princess.
Yeah. So you go a princess today. But it's those things, right? And she remembers all those things. Those are highlights of her childhood as they're growing up and they're coming about. And she's seeing me in the classroom. She's seeing me at home. She sees how I am in the community, right? So I'm her role model with a lot of things. And now that she is more exposed to other males in the community, she sees those things.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, he didn't really do that. And she sees it as like, that's not how my pops did it. So
There's certain standards now.
there's standards now that
and
are
that's
set.
good too. Also, for later on in her life, of male figures in her life, that hey, this is what my standard was, how my dad taught me. So that's pretty cool. And I grew up. My stepdad came into my life as a teenager, and again, maybe thinking of the old school way, like he was thinking, well, I don't really know her. I don't really want to be too much. But that kind of hurt the relationship a little bit because we didn't get to know each other. And then all of a sudden I'm an adult and I feel like we got to know each other as adults, but it would have been cool if it would have been a little bit more father-daughter type of thing, And, but again, talking to him now, he says, I was afraid that I would look weird or that I was trying too hard and totally get it, difficult situation.
Yeah, and how could he not, right? I mean, who did he learn from, right? I mean, sometimes who was his father and who was his
you're a
male
product
role
of your
models?
environment, and unfortunately, I think
I mean, it's all those things that
breaking those chains.
Yeah. And I feel like in education, I think we are chain breakers. We have to be. We have to be innovative all the time. We have to try new strategies. The same stuff doesn't work all the time because the communities evolve. The families evolve. The type of expectations that the families have towards their children evolve. So as educators, we have to change. We have to stay ahead of the game. And I feel like sometimes it's easy to conform as educators and say, hey, I'll just talk to mom because mom gets it done.
Yeah.
Because it is easier, okay? And I'm not going to say I didn't do that because it was easier. I knew Dad, I'm going to have to call him like 4 times, but Mom, once I ring, she answers right away, right? So sometimes I took the easy way out. But, looking back now, especially in my later years, now I was insistent, I want to share the same info I did with Mom with you. That way you hear it from me and not from her. You know what I'm saying?
What's interesting too is I've noticed that at least this is the case with my family is that the grandpas that were the dads that weren't as involved are super involved now. Oh. Because my dad, he picks up the baby every Monday. Today's Monday, so he'll be picking him up. And he's constantly babysitting. He's constantly doing stuff. And then my husband's dad constantly involved with the kids, taking him to jiu-jitsu, picking up, calling every day, how is school? How is jiu-jitsu? How is this? And they were the dads that were working for our childhood, so we didn't see them as much. So they're kind of making up for it through being a grandpa, which I love. Yeah. I love that they're embracing being a grandpa and kind of trying again.
Well, I think it's their opportunity to learn from where they could have improved, right? Where they could have done better. I give my dad a hard time because I'm just like, where's all that love when you were raising us, man? I was just like, the way you are with your grandkids, like, I didn't even know you knew how to do the baby talk.
And I guess grandparents get that a lot too, though, like, in general, because it's, hey, that's not how it was when I was a kid.
Yeah, I couldn't have 5 desserts. What's happening here?
But I did say the whole thing where I was just like, my dad used to tell me, he was really big because I used to give him a hard time because, my younger brothers are way younger than me. And, I had to work for all my stuff, the summer jobs to get my Nikes, to get my new school clothes, to do this and that. And then when my brothers came along, they got the nice clothes, the mall trips. My parents bought them a vehicle for high school. It was like me and my sister had to share an old car that broke down all the time, that we had to, purchase between the two of us, And I remember having that conversation. My dad's all like, you know what? We gave them the best life we could at that time. And we gave you guys the best life we could at the time. It just happens to be that now we have a lot more resources than we did back then. And now your siblings, take advantage of it. And I think about the same thing for the grandparents now. They did the best they could with strategies that they had from the environment they were raised in to do the best that they could. And now with the grandchildren, they do have another set of experiences and a different go around, to say like you know what, I'm going to try to do things differently now. They're evolving. So with that, as educators in the classroom, we have to take that perspective, right? So if we know grandparents are now more involved with their children, then that's a resource. And we have to start tapping into it more in the classroom, saying we can't get grandparents, grandfathers more in the classroom. I did this Uncle Appreciation Day at school one time, and it was a huge success. And I thought about why, and I realized that there was not a lot of, that's not something that was being done. And it was just an idea I got from a blog that I had read from a teacher that did it somewhere in Connecticut. And I was just like, yeah, why not? Let's try this Uncle Appreciation thing,
See if it works out.
Yeah, and it was an uncles and aunties thing. And uncles and aunties showed up,
Yes.
They represented.
I've never heard of that. That's such a cool idea. I'm never invited to anything.
Well, I know, and you're very involved. I'm very involved with my niece and nephew. They mean the world to me,
Well, you're covered in tattoos.
All their children's artwork are my tattoos, and yeah, so if they need for me, I'm gonna ride for my nieces and nephews when they need me, So why aren't we using that resource in the classroom?
I think teachers think these are going to be flops, these events. Oh, no one will come. No one will come. Well, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they will be flops. Sometimes you'll get 2. But hey, 2 is better than none.
That's true.
And then the more you do it, the more you try, eventually you're going to have a great big hit on your hands. And so I would hope that we no longer use that fear of, it's just no one's going to end up coming as as a ruined opportunity, because the more we do Aunt and Uncle Day, Grandfather's Day or Grandparents' Day, all the different things, Big Brother, Big Sister, all these opportunities, eventually there'll be more family involvement in these areas that we need so that we can have representation.
Yeah. And, as we're trying to seek that representation in the classroom, right, we have to be our own advocates, right? We have to be our own promotion. We have to be our own cheerleaders when it comes to emphasizing that fatherhood engagement in the classroom, whether it's, grandparents, uncles, step parents, everybody, right? But we have to be the biggest advocates, for them and highlight it. So that means when a grandparent does come in, we have to be like, thank you for coming in. This is amazing. I really appreciate you being here. Like, you being here is going to make such a big difference in your grandchild's life. And they're going to be so excited to see you. And we got to be those fathers hype men, right? To make sure that they're all riled up. They're like, oh man, that was, I totally made an impact on my kiddo. If I did it more often, they're going to be more resilient. They're going to display more pro-social activities. They may not say it that way, that professional terminology, but they're going to be like, I kicked butt for my kid today, he loved seeing me there, and it's going to be amazing. And it is amazing. To see the impact it has. Every time I walk into my kid's school and she sees me, her face just lights up. Aww. Even now in middle school, she gets a little embarrassed because I do some embarrassing stuff to her. But I know she still appreciates it because she knows she can count on me for whatever she needs. And if, my brothers and Tanya's siblings did more, their grandparents did more, then imagine how many more times she would light up.
It's that whole takes a village thing.
Yeah.
And I heard it's not it takes a village, it takes a healthy village.
Oh, I love that.
It's once you have all those people involved, and then we're all trying to do positive, then it can only be good. It can only lead to good.
I love that. And
you have to build that village.
Yes, right? You have to put work towards it.
Yeah, it's like a growing field. You got to fertilize it. You got to till it. You got to clean the weeds out every now and again.
Yeah, you can't just expect it to be let's see what happens.
Yeah. My dad just recently did Grandpa's Day for the baby. And to this day, his teachers have multiple times been like, I don't know who had more fun, Everest or your dad. And he stayed an hour longer than the event.
Oh, wow.
Keep playing with all the babies. And he called me after. He's like, I stayed longer because they had music class and I wanted to see what their music class was. And I was like, that's so great, Dad. And
really
like,
cool.
I could have been like, well, Dad, remember when you weren't there for all the things for me? But instead I was like, no, I'm just going to highlight the positive. I'm just going to be like, Dad, thanks for showing up.
Mm-hmm.
So glad you had fun. Everest, is a baby, so he might not necessarily remember, but he's going to continue to build that bond with you because of things like this. And now his teachers know too. That guy that comes every Monday to pick up, he also loves volunteering, and like maybe he'll do more in the classroom as Everest gets older. So I love it.
And my dad's provided some of the best support for my classroom. Being an educator, we know we're always limited in resources.
Yes.
We're always, I feel like fighting a current to make sure that we have everything we need to provide the children a great education. And I just remember that anytime I needed something from my fathers, they would step up. The playground's just getting a lot of weeds, and I'm supposed to be doing it. And I had a father come in, volunteer to pull all the weeds and do a safety check
that's
around
so
the fence
awesome.
Really cool.
to make sure there's not cigarette butts and anything, broken glass, all those things. And sometimes it's those little things, but they're so impactful.
Oh yeah,
and
and great examples of what teachers can offer.
Yeah, and
when
one
they
thing
don't
that
know.
with my teachers that I always talk when we talk about volunteers, and it's not always come and read.
You're right.
I said
right.
it's as simple as your trash is out there, and hey, we have a couple bags here. If you can walk him to the trash on your way to your car, like anything can help. And anybody. It doesn't take a mom.
I've had grandpas offer to hang shelves for me and my co-teachers before. Hey, do you need that? Or, hey, this is like hung up wrongly or it's falling off. I'll fix this for you. And we'll be like, oh, we have someone that does that. Oh, no, I got you.
Yeah.
And they're so kind.
And but the impact, I feel like, is the big thing. I did my student teaching with a phenomenal second grade teacher. Her name was Michelle Minez at the Dolores Gonzalez right across from the zoo. She was a phenomenal educator, and she did a lot of parent involvement. I remember seeing a father and a mother, because they were both there, and they were fixing some shelves. And I was there doing my student teaching. I was very young. But I remember hearing the kid being like, that's my dad, and that's my mom right there helping out.
Oh, so proud.
She's the one she made the food for us, I mean, it just highlights the impact that it has on the kids, seeing their, parents do stuff for their school, right? Their community. And I think that's where our behavior is just not about making our lives easier, even though it does. Having volunteers, I always tell Paloma and everybody, I always had parents volunteer on my messiest days, if I was going to let the kids go to town on some paint, I'd be like, ooh, this is a perfect day to volunteer. And I'd have the parents clean up, and I'd be like, okay, come on, kids, let's go outside because our parents.
That's a good one.
Yeah. But, the kids seeing their dads or their parents doing stuff for their school, their classroom, gives them ownership of their classroom, their education. It's that whole thing when I was a director of a center, I always used to tell them, like, it's not my center, it's not my classroom, it's our classroom, it's our program, it's our. And once we change that I to a we and that me to ours, it really just changes the way that even the kids address it, because I used to be like, oh, you guys need to clean my classroom because look, it's a big old mess. And now it's like, hey, our classroom's dirty. We don't
Create a
want
classroom culture.
Yeah, and you create that classroom culture, but you expand it, right? Once you involve the family, it's like, hey, our classroom's doing this and our families are doing this for it. They're cooking this food for us, or they're supporting our bake sale, to do this. So there's all these different things, and I feel like it creates that sense of community where not only the families want to be more involved because they feel appreciated, they see that they're making a big impact, but we're definitely highlighting how the kids feel, right? When they see all those actions happening. Yeah. Like, I mean, I can only imagine, like, how a kid who's never seen their parents at the school and now they're volunteering.
Or those kids in those videos that are, like, doing, like, a play and they're looking, they're, like, constantly searching. My heart always breaks until it, like, gets to the point where they finally see their parent, and I'm like, phew, the parent shut up. Because it's so impactful. This conversation has been amazing, honestly. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yes.
Especially because it's a new perspective for us, something that we wouldn't be able to talk about on our own, Paloma and I. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah,
You
Do
guys
wanna
had a lot of
highlight some
experience
things?
with fatherhood. Talking
Yeah.
about your families.
That's true.
I think
That's
it's always
true.
great.
Yeah.
We know more than we know.
That's
and I
right.
feel like once we have that conversation going, it's just more exposure.
Exactly. And we're always talking about representation and just having everybody having a voice so that in, just everything you were saying at the beginning and connecting to the end about the sense of community and just, everybody having a part in trying to help in this field,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great conversation. Thank you. And some highlights for this month. Don't forget about the Explora event.
Yes. Explora STEM Summit.
Yeah, the STEM Summit, August 24th. Contact Explora or myself.
Yeah, registrations are already on the website. It's $20. The goodies bags are already getting developed. We're going to have phenomenal presenters there on all STEM topics.
Exciting.
Yeah, the food. I mean, that $20 covers a goodie bag that has over $125 worth
Wow.
of science materials. It covers breakfast, it covers lunch, and it covers snacks.
Wow.
And you also get additional resources at some of those workshops. And some of those workshops are going to range from composting in the classroom to supporting sensory in the classroom. And
Math.
it goes from infant, toddler, all the way to school age activities. The presenters are going to be, they run from a wide range, but we do have some people coming from Las Cruces. Some educators from Las Cruces are going to be presenting. We have faculty from different colleges that are
gonna be
presenting.
Spanish and English.
Yeah, English and Spanish. They're going to have live translation for the event. So sign up. They're only accepting 220 registrations, I think. So it fills up
Probably
quick.
filling up fast.
And
Yeah.
are there, this time, is there scholarships? If anybody
There
can't
are,
afford
yeah.
it?
On the website, there is contact info if you need a scholarship.
We'll post the information so you
Yep.
guys can get all that. And don't forget to visit your toy lending and resource library in your region.
Yeah, as you know, we film in our Albuquerque Toy Lending Library. It's an amazing resource. We also have the summer training calendar for Early Childhood Services Center if you're in need of a training. So keep on top of that. Send in your questions. We have the
Yes.
opportunity to answer questions from the field. If you have a story, if you have a question, whether you want to shout out your name or you want to stay anonymous, either way, we'd love to hear what you are thinking and for a chance for it to be shared within our podcast.
Right.
And so that's
yeah,
it.
thank you for
Get
that.
your fathers involved, people.
Get all the
Yes.
fathers involved.
And grandpas and uncles and big
all
brothers
the,
and
yes,
little
all the
brothers.
male figures, and continue to listen or watch the podcast. We really thank you for being here.
Yeah, this is Learning with Lobos. Adios.
Daddy want to get that.